Hi everyone, welcome to the Coding Zoo. If this is your first time joining, my name is Shane and this is the Coding Zoo JavaScript Building Blocks series. Our goal at Coding Zoo is to help others to learn how to program, perhaps create a career in programming. So in today's lesson, we are going to cover object literals. We won't go too in depth. We'll have another video for that. We're going to cover the for-in loop. And we're also going to cover the ES6 For-Of loop. So if that interests you, stick around. We're going to jump right into it. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. If you look at my desktop here, I have a CZJS15 folder. I created that from a template folder that we created in our first lesson. If you haven't created that already, not a big deal. It's just two files basically. So if you go inside of here, here's the folder structure. You can also download it from our website too. So if you haven't created that folder already, no big deal. Go ahead and pause the video and go ahead and create it. We have an index file and we have a main.js file. Let's go ahead and look at those two files. I have them open in Notepad++. Feel free to use whatever editor you'd like. I recommend that you code along with me. You'll definitely remember it more if you do so. Just stop the video if you get behind and go ahead and resume once you're caught up. So I have my main.js file open, have my index file, it points to the main.js. Very simple stuff. Let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to create what's called an object literal. So we'll go in depth into objects in an upcoming video. Look forward to that. I love working with objects, especially coming from a Java background versus JavaScript. So an object basically is a structure that is used to represent real world items. So one object might be a car, and a car has what kind of properties? It has a wheel, it has a radio, it has a seat, it has an engine, has all different types of properties, right? So that's what an object is. An object is a structure that has other data structures inside of it, and that structure is meant to represent a real world entity. So I'm going to create a object using object literal notation. It's very simple. Let car equals, I'm going to add a wheel property. I'm going to add a gas tank property. And I'm going to add an engine property. Okay, so I have a car. That car has certain properties. It has a wheel. The wheels are a tire stone. Is that a brand of a wheel? I think so. We'll pretend it is. I don't remember. All right, so I have a gas tank. The gas tank is full. And I have an engine, and hey, it's a 5.7 liter Hemi. Okay, so this is an object. So when you're programming, it's good to group properties and functions into objects and into modules. That helps you put context around the data and context around the functions. It makes the code easier to understand. It makes the code easier to maintain. It makes the code easier to support. Doing so creates code that is cohesive. It has everything in context. It has high cohesion. High cohesion relates to better maintainability. In other words, you can maintain it easier. Okay, so that's an object literal. So you can also add on a function. So I'm going to add on the function drive. Okay, so I have a function called drive, and it starts the driving process. I'm going to save it. I'm going to go down to below here, and I'm going to call car.drive. Okay, so before we test it out, let's look over the code, see if anything's missing. So I've got car it has wheel, gas tank, engine. I'm missing a comma between these two items. So engine and drive, that would have been a bug. And I've got car.drive. Let's click save. Let's refresh my browser here. I've got it opened up with that index file, which runs that JavaScript. Let's refresh, see what it does. There we go. The car is driving. So to iterate, we defined a car object using object literal notation. The car has properties with values such as wheel, gas tank, engine. Keep in mind, objects can have other objects inside them. So one of these properties, like the wheel, could be an object itself. It has even more properties. So you can create a hierarchy of properties to represent a real world entity. And you'll notice the properties, you put a name, you put a colon, and then you put the value. It might be a string, might be an integer, maybe another object, and then you put comma, and then you put the next property, and then you put colon and value. So it's name value pairs. You have a colon between the name and the value, and you have a comma after the value. And then when you get to creating the function that is part of that class, or functions, it's the same syntax. You have a drive name, and you have this function as the value. If you want to add more, you put a comma. That simple. This is what's called an object literal. Very powerful. You should learn how to use objects. Okay, so let's move on to the next item in this lesson. So in previous lessons, we covered different ways to loop through different data structures. The next thing we're going to cover in this lesson is a for-in loop. A for-in loop was created to loop through the properties of an object. That's why I showed you how to create an object literal real quick. Let's go ahead and create a for-in loop for parentheses, and I'm going to call the variable property. You can name it whatever you want. Property in, and then in what? In my object, which is a car, parentheses, squiggly bracket, squiggly bracket. Now I'm going to write out, so when we loop through these properties, I'm going to write out the property names. So document, so there we go. See, document write. Document is an object. Write is a function on that object. Document's a built-in object to the browser, which represents your HTML document. Write is a function on that. So your entire HTML document is translated into a hierarchy of objects. So it's good to know about object literals and objects in general. All right. Document write, property. I'm going to write a breakpoint above that. Write out some HTML for a breakpoint, or rather a new line. Okay, I'm going to add some text there. And hey, I'm going to access that properties value using an array type, array-like syntax on the object. So I don't know what the property's name really is because I'm looping through it, and let's pretend I didn't write the object. Let's just pretend this is an object I'm not too aware of, but I want to loop through and write the name and value of the properties. So this writes out the property name. Here's a way to actually grab the property value. So using an array-like syntax. So array is a bracket and property. So this is a way to dynamically access, without knowing their names, properties in an object. So that should do it. Yep, that looks good. I'm going to go ahead and click save. Make sure there's no bugs. I think it looks okay. One way to find out is to run it and see. Go to my browser, click refresh. There we go. So I have a wheel. That's the property variable. And here's the value. I have gas tank, it's full. My engine's 5.7 liter Hemi. And the drive, well, it just wrote out the function. So it's not actually calling the function, but it's writing out the definition of the function. That's pretty interesting. Okay, so that's pretty simple. This is a for-in loop. It's mainly used to iterate over properties of a given object. And you can actually use those properties to access the object properties value using an array-like syntax. That's one way of using it. Let's move on to the next loop that we're going to cover. The next loop is called a for-of, and it was introduced, I believe, in ES6, so it's fairly new. For-of is pretty nice. You can use it to iterate over any data structure that has the iterator method implemented. And you can even create objects later on that have their own iterator method, and we'll show that in the next few lessons, how you can create an object how you can create an object that can be iterated. Can't say that. So I can't say that word. All right, that's my country Louisiana talk coming out there. All right, let's go ahead and jump in the for-of loop. So I'm going to go back to my notepad here. So I'm going to create an array. You're used to seeing arrays if you've seen our previous lessons. You can also do this on a map and a set and other objects, again, that have the iterator method. And we'll go over those different data structures in upcoming videos very soon. So let's go ahead and create an array. All right, so I have an array of cars. Let's use the for-of. Going to do a variable named car. You can call it whatever name you want. Since I'm looping through an array of cars, why not call it a car, which is what it is. All right, so let's see if we can do that. I'm going to write out the variable. Going to put a new line before each car. Okay, let's look for bugs. Let cars. That looks good for car of cars. How about I put a let or var here? Let's do let. Okay, that looks good. Let's save it and refresh. There we go. So I looped through each item in the array. A very simple syntax. It's a lot simpler using like a regular for loop that we use in previous lessons. Pretty neat stuff. That's it. So that's how you use a for-of loop. It's very easy to loop through an array or loop through a data structure that has that iterable or iterator method. Very simple, much simpler and easier to read syntax than the regular for loop we've covered in previous lessons. All right, so we've covered object literals. Hey, we should start using objects. They are very good at creating cohesive code, which means things are put into context, they're put in the right place, and that makes your code more maintainable. In an enterprise environment, we need that because we get big code bases. And also, we went over the for-in and the for-of loop. So I hope that makes sense. I hope you understood it. If you didn't, hey, let me know below. Feel free to ask me any questions. I will get back to you. Also, what are some other loops that you'd like to see? I think we'll probably cover next in the upcoming lessons the different methods on an array list, and we'll also cover different data structures. The different methods on an array list, the first one we'll cover is a for each, which is very much like the for-of. A little different, but close. Anyway, thanks for joining. I hope you enjoyed the lesson. If you did, click subscribe and click that bell icon. If you and others want to learn how to program, you know someone, send them our way. We'd love to help them out. Thanks again. Have a great week.